As always, this is a spoiler warning. I'll be talking in length about Clock Tower Ghosthead, or Clock Tower 2 The Struggle Within, as you might know it in English, and spoil a lot of the game. I'll also briefly mention moments of the previous games, but I won't be spoiling story elements of those games. Recently, I've been binge-watching videos and Let's Plays about the Clock Tower series. Mostly, I shy away from horror games. I have a thing where I'm really bad at dealing with things chasing me and jumping out at me. Just check out my playthrough of Tomb Raider I've been doing recently, you'll see what I mean. Despite knowing the game so well, moments still have creatures jump out at me and spook me quite a lot. Tomb Raider is an action-adventure game, so imagine my tender heart trying to deal with an actual horror game designed to do this to the max. This is why, personally, I don't do good with horror games. But I do love and respect a lot of the ideas and design work that comes from horror-style games. Silent Hill and Resident Evil both have such fantastic concepts and characters and storylines that I just adore them. Which leads me to Clock Tower, a game I knew kind of existed in passing, but I knew nothing about it. I mentioned during my university days from a friend perhaps, but not much. I only really knew of the name faintly, which is what made me start watching people play the game when it piqued my interest. I should mention my main sources for viewing this content came from Picasbury Blue's Let's Plays and Nitro Rad's series of reviews on the games. It's important to always consider the sources that help shape your experiences with something, especially with a first time look like these did for me. It helps establish bias and whatnot, and I just wanted to mention as much before going forward. What I want to discuss is Ghosthead. Now, thanks to confusing naming and the localization, Ghosthead is known in the English version as Clock Tower 2 The Struggle Within, so if you're unsure what I'm talking about, it's this one, which I'll be calling Ghosthead for simplicity's sake. When it comes to Ghosthead, there's a lot of missed potential with this game. It's no secret that there's a lot wrong with the level design and the control scheme. Ghosthead is a spin-off of the main series, it's kind of an experimental kind of thing. It was also when the main director left the series, and it was handed to someone else. With these factors in mind, a lot happened to change how this game would be made, with new hands and new minds focusing on it. Let's talk about the main duo. I really love Bates. His character is so hilarious and bold, and provides the perfect balance to Alyssa's more timid and quiet nature. Where Alyssa is careful, Bates is boisterous. It's a perfect coin flip to center the game mechanics around, and to allow two different branches to the levels and ways to tackle the puzzles. It's kind of like Super Paper Mario, in a way, a game with two very different mechanics. If you find yourself stuck somewhere in that game in one mode, you're encouraged to shift to the other mode to see if there's something new you can only see in that end of the other. Can't find a way forward in 2D? Switch to 3D and the path forward might become visible. So Ghosthead uses a similar structure to the depths of its gameplay. There are certain things only Bates can interact with and take note of, and vice versa with Alyssa. Can't do something as Alyssa? Switch to Bates to find out if you can progress instead. It's a really cool concept, and you can see how it could have been executed so fantastically in the point-and-click genre, not to mention the constant exploration in the horror setting. It lends itself well to the setting, and you can really see the potential here. But that's all it really is. Potential. Ghosthead never really progressed past this point. There's a lot of sloppy design work in the game, and I know that sounds kinda mean to say, but the execution of this potential structure just didn't work. There really is a lot to love in this game, but it's so hard to love it when everything else convolutes around the good to twist it into an unenjoyable experience. On a general note, when it comes to criticism, I like to apply a general rule to it. When providing criticism, you should provide a method for the material to be improved in the direction you're talking about. It's why when I discuss what I don't like about something in a game, I tend to try my best to give a piece of advice to better what I consider less than ideal. This is definitely a preference kind of thing. I know not everyone would agree with this line of thinking, but the sake of how I tackle things and how I talk about them, this is what I'll be trying to do over the course of this video. So let's get into some criticism. Level design. In Ghosthead, just like the previous two games, there are 3 levels, or scenarios as the game calls them. 3 separate sections of gameplay. The first stage takes place in your uncle and auntie's house, the second a hospital, and the last a research facility. I think of all of them, the one that has the most solid structure is the beginning stage in the house. The house has 2 stories and many rooms between. It's actually here that it makes it become very obvious that this is a really early localization. I mean, anyone familiar with Japanese culture will know that Western houses don't look like Alyssa's uncle's does. It has a Genkan entryway, and she even changes from outdoor shoes to slippers inside. There are tatami mats floors, and some of the doors are sliding paper ones, all very Japanese house things. Much like 4Kids dubs, like the Pokemon one renaming everyone to Western names, the characters here don't have Japanese names. Alyssa and Bates are very strange names, and Uncle Philip, Cousin Stephanie, yeah, you can tell this got the early day localization treatment. But back to the level design. There could have been some variation in the setting to help players identify the rooms easier. Something like a scroll on a door, a painting, a sign, something shoved beside them in the hallways. Like, just imagine if there were some candles by a door or a cute little sign outside Stephanie's room with some tiny drawings she did on them. Personally, I have no idea who Stephanie really was until later on in the stage. Philip did a poor job of explaining anything. I got Ashley from the opening dialogue, which was nice, but no mention of Stephanie. Something about her earlier would have helped associate the character better and given us more explanation as to why Alyssa is so determined not to hurt her cousin, despite her trying to, stab and kill us at every moment she gets. Some way to help the player remember locations is needed in all these levels. Personally, I think door labels works really well. In fact, the devs added them in the next level where the hospital rooms have labels out the front of each door. However, this setting isn't really any better. In fact, I'd say it's worse. If you're going to use a setting like a hospital where all the rooms are built to be so similar, if not totally the same, then there needs to be a way to easily orient the player. If you're getting lost because everything looks identical, it's doing nothing but wasting the player's time and adding frustration to the gameplay. For your horror game, you really don't want a player to be getting frustrated. It leaves no room to be scared, and suspense and unease is quickly thrown out the window. It's hard to pull off, but maybe given the scenario of a zombie infestation, they could have used variables as a helpful identification tool. Like a certain blood splatter on a door, a window smashed out on another, maybe even a vending machine next to one specific door. You know, small things, just to help the landmarks stick out more, especially if you want the player to remember locations and re-enter rooms frequently. Which, in a game that makes you check locations twice with 2 different characters, uses a lot. Anyway, it's no secret that the levels in this game aren't very well designed, especially the last one in the research facility. It's an even worse version of the second level. And the bizarre addition of the zombies in this level as well is so weird. Why bring them back when the previous 2 levels had completely unique chase characters? If anything, the zombies cause more of an annoyance than an addition. The game already supplies you with a unique chase character in the form of Maxwell. He's a lot more reminiscent of Scissorman as you hear the scrape of his blade before you can see him enter the room. So they made this character just for this chapter, but they still felt the need to add more? The previous games only had Scissorman throughout each level, so why did this game need more? Personally, it kind of feels like the reason they did this was because they didn't have confidence in Maxwell being a good chaser. They should have gone full ham on him, that is to say, throw everything into this design and aspect. Make him show up more frequently, give him a more definable presence. Instead of being cheap and making zombies appear in random new rooms, making it nothing more than a hindrance to your exploration, as opposed to a more direct approach of the pursuer jumping out of somewhere to make you do a 180. Entering a room to have Scissorman drop down from the roof after you move to examine something feels more like an easy scenario to then plan how you're going to run from him. But in the case of the zombies, they're just there. Like, they just spawn into the room and the music plays when you enter, and it's like, god damn, it's time to head back to that fire extinguisher again. And don't worry, we'll get into that. Ghost Head is a weird mix of trying to break away from the Clock Tower formula while at the same time trying to embrace it. The game is a spin-off, so it shouldn't have to try so hard to incorporate the mainline aspects so much. Take Pokemon spin-offs for an example, Mystery Dungeon and the trading card game. Both use different mechanics and focus on completely different things. In essence, the only thing still linking them to the Pokemon universe is that they use the characters and moves from the games in their settings. Now, Pokemon might be an unfair comparison, as it's much easier to do spin-offs of such a well-known and gigantic franchise. In the case of Clock Tower, it's a bit harder as the Clock Tower formula is deeply rooted in the horror chase aspect of gameplay. Both previous games followed the same formula very closely, so then, is Ghost Head held back by needing the chase aspect, or is it the thing keeping the game together? That, in essence, is Ghost Head's main question it needs answered. In Ghost Head's case, I feel like it needs to swerve the game design around their strongest element. I think this lies with Bates and Alyssa. Their dynamic lends so well to mixed gameplay and a system that could go really well with the exploration the game wants you to do. This can still work with the chase aspect so long as it's worked around the exploration in a way that doesn't hinder it. In the previous 2 games, exploring was necessary to progress the story, Because of this, Scissorman could have a chance to pop out of a number of areas in different rooms, forcing you into chase mode instead of exploration mode. This is the kind of balance Clock Tower strikes, making you fragile enough that you need to run when Scissorman shows up, and go right back to trying to work out how to escape when you successfully avoid him. They do try this in Ghosthead as well, and as far as the first level is concerned, it's done somewhat okay. The samurai armor is just not helpful at all and really shouldn't be involved, since you already have a pursuer in that level. It feels bloated to add another thing to the mix, especially one you can only avoid by running and just waiting for it to despawn from the room you want to go into. No way to be sure it's gone like you can with Stephanie when she has you in chase mode. At least with Stephanie, you can hide behind things and shoot her with a gun to end sequences and go right back to exploration. The armor just adds an unnecessary addition to the chase portion of the gameplay that causes more frustration than decency, just like the zombies in the third scenario. I like that Bates can only use the gun and Alyssa can only use her surroundings. It gives more depth to them. Alyssa isn't a fighter and can't use a gun and prefers to run or knock out, while Bates is a cold hard killer and doesn't give a fuck. Though the commands for what Bates and Alyssa can interact with seem random and so specific that it's hard to discover them organically through the game's mechanics and design, everything feels so limited and cut to the point. There should be some room for human error here. It's understandable more in the later part of the game, but to be so unforgiving even in the beginning, it's more frustrating than anything else, which, like I've said before, is not ideal. And that goes without saying. Hello Fire Extinguisher, we're back. In case you didn't know, there's one section in the final level where a fire extinguisher is the only way to destroy enemies much further in the level. Backtracking could be a very useful tactic in level design, but not in this way. There should be more avenues to use the methods to end chase sequences, especially when this one item is so far back in the level, it's ridiculous. Why is the fire extinguisher the only reusable item? Why not the chairs and random extras in some rooms? This inconsistency has seemingly no purpose. It makes the fragility of the despawning items feel very artificial. If you want to give the player something identifiable to be able to use throughout the level, and the level is so long, then why not add more fire extinguishers? A research lab would have them in multiple rooms everywhere, so it's reasonable to still limit it to the design of the game and keep it difficult, but also add more than one that is in the second half of the level. Players can feel more inclined to try and search their surroundings for a new weapon or hiding place to use as opposed to constantly revisiting the only one they know works reliably with gritted teeth. Ghosthead is supposed to be about exploring your surroundings to progress the story and solve puzzles while tiptoeing around the pursuer coming for you. So then why is there so little reason to explore for ways to avoid this pursuer in a game that wants you to do this so desperately? I think at the heart of it, this is the major problem with Ghosthead, like I mentioned before. This is where it tries to stick to Clock Tower and Clock Tower 2's formula, while also trying so hard to break away from it with Alyssa and Bates' dual exploration tactics. But I'm not one of the designers of Ghosthead, so I can't actually tell you what Ghosthead was trying to do specifically, only what it feels like it was trying to do to me. In the end, there's so much potential in the concepts of Ghosthead. The execution couldn't keep up with the ideas on display, and instead we got an admittedly subpar version of what could have been a truly fantastic experience. A true situation of what could have been. If there's ever another PS1 game that needs the remake from the ground up like Spyro or Crash, I'd want it to be this. Sure, there are a lot of PS1 classics that deserve the treatment as well, but I'd love to see the lost potential of these characters used in a stronger game, and a new experience. Capcom has been doing such excellent work in their Resident Evil remakes over the past decade, I can't help but long for them to branch out in some of their other IPs under their umbrella. Maybe one day they'll see the lost potential of Clock Tower's odd sheep Ghosthead. Until then, I can dream. If you got this far, wow, thank you so much for listening to me ramble about this game. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to put together and to watch so much about this game and just to think about it in general. I had a really good time. Thank you very much for watching. This is Ash, signing out.